Simon.
Hey guys, how's it going? So today I'm going to go through a few different topics I think you guys have seen about. We're going to go through some apps, what to wear when it's cold, what to avoid for safety that's out there. I assume everyone here uses Outer Harbour mostly with what they're doing, and self-rescue. So for apps that I use, the main things I'm looking at for windsurfing, it probably applies to sailing and all that, is I want to know the forecast. Is the wind going to change on me? Is rain coming? Stuff like that. And then I've got two ways of checking after that. So I use the Windy app or igetwind.com. There's a model that's relatively new called the HRR model, High Resolution Rapid Refresh, I think it's called. I find that the most predictable for here. A lot of apps, if you look at them, they'll be like, oh, it's supposed to be windy. You show up and you see this.
What's that predictable app?
Windy, W-I-N-D-Y. It is the red icon one. So that one gives you the model for free. A lot of websites, when you go on them, you'll have to pay to get that model. So the Windy one I like because I can also, with that app, I can set alarms. So I have spots all over Ontario that I set for different parameters. Like if it's a northeast wind and it's 5 to 10 knots, or sorry, 10 to 15 knots, send me an alarm. So 2 days in advance, spots will ping and tell me where to look for wind. It's a free app, which is nice. So Windy, and it's a red icon. The other one, if you don't want an app, you can go on a website called igetwind.com, and then there you can find Cherry Beach, and it has the same thing. Along the top, it'll have all the different models, and you can find HRR there as well. So that model is really only good up to about 36 hours. And even then, like I can go to bed one night, it says it's gonna be windy, wake up in the morning, and the model's changed. So this year's been really unpredictable for weather for that type of stuff. Usually it's not that bad, but that's the best one I find. After that, so now I know my forecast of what the wind is supposed to do. So that's handy when I'm on the water. If I know it's supposed to shift offshore, I can, like when the wind starts dying, I start heading home because I know all of a sudden, in the next 20 minutes, it might take me an hour to get home rather than 10 minutes right now. Then I start looking at rain. So rain can do two things. It can either increase the wind or it can kill the wind generally. So, or it can change the direction. It can do that as well. So I want to know if rain that's coming, if I go on the weather network and it just says it's going to rain, there's lots of different types of rain. There is little spitting rain, or there is thunderstorms. And the problem you'll have is it'll say, like if you look at Toronto, it'll say there's going to be thunderstorms all day. So remember that day where like the trees got knocked down? I think it was in July, like that crazy, crazy storm. It was 5 minutes of chaos, and that was it here. You could see the wall of rain coming, and then it went right past us, and the rest of the day was okay. So I like to look at the actual radar to see where that rain is hitting, because often it's going to be north of Bloor Street. It won't hit here. Like all year, I canceled one lesson for rain. I think I canceled two, but one of them I didn't have to. So here is a pretty good spot for dodging rain. Any questions on apps there? Okay. Oh, and then one other thing. So I have another app. You can also use the websites as well for the Toronto Island Airport. So that's pretty handy for getting live updates of current weather. So say the forecast says at 2 p.m. it's supposed to pick up. I will be constantly checking the island airport, and that'll hopefully give me a heads up that it's about to hit. So unless I see it coming, I can always check there and be like, oh, the wind's already hitting on the west side of the island. It'll probably be here in 15 minutes, kind of stuff like that. Or if I'm, the webcam's down, we have a webcam that you can use to check to see what you can see out there. The island airport is another way of checking what the actual wind is doing. If no one is on the water, the webcam is not the easiest thing to figure out how much wind there is. The difference between 7 knots and 14 knots is very hard to pick apart. For clothes, so for cold weather, it depends on what sport you're doing, I guess, because you'll want different attire for every sport. But for windsurfing, I recommend 4-3 wetsuits. Because they're tight, they're going to trap the water and keep you warm. So there's 4-3 or 5-4, and that means the thickness. So in the chest it's 5, and in the arms it's 4. Or you can go with a dry suit. The downsides you have with a dry suit is if they tear, they're quite detrimental. So with windsurfing, some of the newer ones have like a canvas fabric over top, so they're a bit more resilient. But any of those things will keep you warm. You want to make sure you're nice and warm. The second you get cold, you get tired. Once you get tired, you probably get into stress, and then things spiral out of control. So 5-4 wetsuits and 4-3 wetsuits are what I'm currently using. Some people have dry suits, they're fine as well right now. A thing that will also help for windsurfing is the accessories. So right now the water is warm, so if I put on my 4-3 wetsuit and I go for a swim, I'd be fine. I probably wouldn't need much else. But once we're out of the water, especially when it's windy, that wind chill effect you get across your body is really, really chilling. So for windsurfing specifically, we have mitts that have the holes cut open in them. And so the reason we have that is we get a lot of power from flexing our forearm to grab on the boom. The wider that grip gets, the more fatigue we get. So we have a tight wetsuit on there strapping down our circulation. And if we have thick gloves, we're gonna go out there and in 10 minutes our forearms will be really, really tired. So open palm gloves are one of the best ways. They're still cold when you fall in the water, but the second you're out, there's no wind chill going across your hands and it makes a big, big difference. You still might have to, if you're out there in November, December, come back in, heat up, and then go back out every once in a while. But they make a world of difference. And then a hoodie is really helpful, or a beanie, just something to cover the skin. Something over your head, a helmet will work too, just something to cut out that wind chill. Oh, and then if you get really cold, one of the common problems that I've seen people do in the past is go take some warm water and then generally hot water and then like shove their cold parts in there, like their feet or their hands, and you don't want to do that. So if your hands and feet get really cold, it's better just use your own body heat to kind of get them up nice and slow. Otherwise, there's more likely that you'll damage your hands, the tissue in your hands. Because you're just freezing cold, put them into boiling water, not boiling, but really hot water, and it'll cause basically nerve damage and tissue damage. Okay, so for hazards in the bay, so the general easy ones to pick out would be rocks. So everyone knows over there by Outer Harbour, there's a giant wall of rocks. So that one's a nice easy one. You can see the rocks. They have rebar in them, so there's pieces of metal pipe kind of crooked sticking out of it, so that adds a little danger in there, but it's a pretty easy visual. Harder spots is straight across over here, there's a sunken barge. So it is the sister ferry, or the brother ferry of that one. It was made at the same time as the original ferry that we have in Toronto downtown, and it had a terrible life, and in like 10 years or less than that, it was a barge stuck over there. So underneath the tip of there, it kind of extends out. So it's a very shallow area. So if you look to the straight out, you'll see that little island. Mm-hmm. To the right side of that is a metal barge that sticks out from under the water. Also in that area, because the water level is down a lot this year, the whole island under the water is fairly shallow. So we had a big windsurfing race about a month ago, and we have foils nowadays, and our foils were touching down. So you have to be careful of what depth you're sailing at. Also in the bay in the far side past that water is relatively shallow, so if you have big swell, when the swell goes down, that water can get down to about maybe 3 or 4 feet. Again, problems for foils. The other spots I would say that have rocks is basically along this shoreline right here. It kicks out before we get to the public beach, and under there's a lot of bad rocks. So generally when I'm teaching my students, I keep them away from there, I keep them away from the rocks over there, and I keep them away from the barge over there. On top of that, on the far side is the boating channel. So this is roughly where we've designated all powerboats to go. So the thing I would say is just like when you cross the road, look both ways. So if you're going in anywhere near that area, it's like our own safety to keep our eyes open to see what other people are doing. Not every driver in the world has the same skill set. Not everyone's watching, so it's best to watch out for yourself. The hard part we generally have is we are going this way while the boats are going this way. So sometimes you have to look behind you, or just keep just a general awareness of boats coming in and out. It makes a big difference. And then one last thing is current. So depending on the wind we have that day, can cause current to happen in different spots. So yesterday we had a southwest wind that's pushing water here. So along the shoreline, we had current funneling along the shoreline here, and then going into the bay over there. So my beginner students would get out, start to struggle, and then they would drift to what I basically have designated dead man's turn. So they go around the corner over here, and then the only way they can get home is they either need to get back to shore and walk, or they need a rescue from one of our boats, or they drift very, very far and somehow get themselves home, which is not the easiest way. So anywhere there is a mouth, so over here between Water Rats and Outer Harbour, between Outer Harbour and the Spit, and then straight across over there for the Toronto Mooring Sail Club. I can't remember what it's called. Do you know?
Oh,
Yeah.
the aquatic park club. And the boat
Aquatic,
racing.
yeah.
The aquatic park.
So whenever there's a wind blowing the same direction, if you're in front of these mouths, you'll have a lot of current. So if you are struggling that day, be aware of where places will be where the current will speed up. Okay? So those are the 3 spots I always think about. Oh, okay. So for calling for help. So we had this actually happen this year. And so I hope everyone has a whistle attached to their life vest or on them at all times. So it's really handy to have something like this because you never know when you will need to blow it. So the big thing I would say is long blasts are the big thing you want to remember. If you're doing a short whistle, all the time I hear when we're teaching lessons, we'll do things called turning on the whistle. Short blasts can have a lot of meanings. So long blasts are the ones that people will notice. So that's 4 to 6 seconds is a long blast. And so if you want the actual international one, it is 3 long blasts, followed by 3 short blasts, followed by 3 long blasts. Okay, so that's SOS. But if you just do long blasts, you will get help. It is not often we hear those. So someone will definitely come over and try to inspect you. And then once you've got someone over there, they can hopefully call for help. Either they themselves can have a radio or a cell phone, communicate with someone to get help, or they can go get somebody on shore to go get someone to get help. Okay. I also recommend with people when they go out, sometimes a cell phone's handy. You could have any type of mechanical failure, and if no one notices you, like say you don't have your whistle, although you shouldn't have that. If people just don't notice you, if it's a really windy day, they're all distracted with their own thing. The nice thing about having a cell phone is you can call someone and tell them to come get you some help, or you can just call 911 and they will find you. Okay. International sound. So if you're struggling, waving above your head, it's not that hard. This will generally get people to come over. Yep.
Just very quickly, there was an incident a few weeks ago where somebody was out on the water and they went to reach for their whistle and their cord was too short.
Yeah.
So make sure that where you can actually
reach your mouth. Yeah. And that is not something you want to fidget with in the moment. So just waving your hands will get you some help if you put it above your head. If you're in the water or if you're on your windsurfer, generally people will notice that. But the whistle is the best because that'll get someone who's not looking at you to notice you and get them to come over. And then the last thing is thumbs up. So if I'm asking for if I see someone that they may not think they're struggling or they're still trying to figure it out, I'll go up and just go like this with them. This is like my international symbol of like, are you okay? And you just respond with a thumbs up back. So if you're ever going up to someone you're not sure and you can't hear them, thumbs up is a great way to ask if they're okay. And then self-rescue. So this is for getting your cell phone. So this is again windsurfing specific. So I have 3 types. There is the light wind, so a day like today where there's no waves, no current, and no wind. So with windsurfing, you want to place the sail on the tail of the board. That way the whole sail's out of the water, you lay down on the front and can paddle it like a paddleboard. The big thing you have to be aware of is that your boom is resting on the tail. So sometimes you might have to lower the boom so that it rests on the tail, because if it's too long, the sail will rest in the water and that'll cause drag. So this is like your light wind rescue, like you're out there, it's gonna take you 45 minutes to an hour to pump home, and if you paddle, maybe it'll take you 15, just to get you home and get you back on land. I have a high wind rescue. So the high wind rescue is a bit more elaborate. You have because you have to take apart all your gear in the water. So you have to detach your sail and start de-rigging your gear on the water, which can be very physical because if you're in waves and stuff like that, it's turning you about, and it can be expensive because you can easily lose pieces. Not every piece of windsurfing gear floats, like your extension doesn't float, stuff like that. So as I'm taking them off, I'm attaching them to the board, and then that way, hopefully I don't lose anything. So I take it all apart, roll up the sail, place it on top, and then I lay on top of the whole kit, and then I can paddle home. So if it's on a wavy day, and I'm stuck on the far side, I might go over there towards land, take apart all my gear, or if I'm in the middle of the water and I feel like I can still get home and there's no imminent danger coming, I can take it all apart, paddle home. The last one is my emergency saver. So this is if, say, I'm out there, and if I didn't have the spit is a nice spot for us to be able to like hide out when stuff gets really crazy. But I see some crazy weather coming, so usually my worst scenario is like a shelf cloud. It's a big wall, and then all of a sudden it goes from this to like chaos. So if I see that coming and I can't windsurf home effectively or quick, I would detach my sail, leave it, and then just paddle my board home. And that's the fastest way to get home. And I'll have no drag, so if I have a fair amount of wind, I'll probably make some good speed against it. So that's my last resort. I haven't had to do that one yet, but you never know. Do you guys have any questions about anything I went through there? I went a little quick, but tried to be thorough. Yeah?
First, Simon, SOS is 3 short.
3 long, 3 short, 3 long.
Not the other way.
Really?
It's the Morse code SOS.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So, or it's specific to marine application.
Where I looked, I thought it was the marine one I looked up, but I think it's 3 long, isn't it?
It's 3 long, 3 short, 3 long. It's
Yeah.
Morse code. The Morse code
Yeah.
for S and L and S.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll double check on that.
Yeah.
Could you explain the wetsuit ratios, those numbers, 4-3, 5-4, what do they mean?
So they're the thickness. So the bigger
Thickness
number
of
is the
each
thickness in
part,
the
I mean.
core, and then the other parts would be the extremities. So 4-3, 3-2 would be 4 millimeters, 3 millimeters, or 5 millimeters, 4 millimeters.
Right, and for windsurfing specific application, is there like a temperature that you look at?
No,
7 degrees.
it depends on the
okay,
person's body temperature. So I have a pretty high core temperature. I get warm very easy. So I could probably go out in less layers than somebody who has a low body temperature core. So if I have a small, very thin woman, they're probably going to have a lower core temperature. So I would recommend extra thick wetsuit. Whereas if I have an overweight big guy, I would recommend a nice 3-2 or 4-3. And the important thing about a wetsuit is that it's really tight. It's going to be somewhat uncomfortable. If the water can get in and out through the cups and stuff like that, you will get really cold because the water temperature can change. It's a sponge. It's meant to hold and trap the water, and then that is supposed to heat up and keep you warm.
Simon, and then
Yep.
types of wetsuits, because for surfers, wetsuits are different than for windsurfers, right?
Mhm. Yeah. So sometimes, so surfing one I wouldn't say is much different, because they'll have the knee pads and stuff like that. Whereas if you go to scuba, they may not have knee pads. So generally, I would say the differences are where we have abrasion. So where there'll be wear and tear. Windsurfing and surfing would generally have more, not defensive, but like more strong materials in the spots where we would wear and tear them. So in the elbows, stuff like that.
But the idea the same. It worms. The
Yep,
worm
yeah,
gets
I
in
could buy a
on top.
surfer's wetsuit, it's okay. Yeah, a scuba one I would not recommend. They may not have shoulder mobility, and I don't think they have knee pads.
Scuba ones are super stiff too, and they can break. So if you move them too much, they'll tear, and then water will go in and out.
Yeah. They also have nowadays, they have chest zips versus back zips, which are the traditional. The chest zips are a little warmer. They make a better seal around the neck, but they're harder to get in and out.
What's your advice on the first thing to do if it's really cold when you get back with yourself?
So I would make sure I got everything out of the water so I don't have to get wet again, and instantly I would get it changed into just warm, dry clothes. So track pants, a sweater, a windbreaker on top of that. If I'm going back on the water, so if I'm wet in a wetsuit and I come off and I just want to like hang out for maybe half an hour while I kind of like get my energy back before I get going, then I would put windbreakers on. So just something to kind of trap the air over the wetsuit so that I don't get cold. Yep.
I just want to add, for this specific location, for the beginners, avoid going out when it's a north wind.
Yeah.
That's especially on the short one. Just forget about, oh nice, 20 knots, I'm going. I have a bad experience, end up with my son on the other shore in the middle of the night, being rescued from the other people from the other club. So just avoid going, forget about it.
Yeah.
You'll have more wind after. Short warning, north wind.
Yeah, so forecasts are really good for that because my biggest fear is I'll teach someone a beginner course and we'll have easy weather the whole time, and they never get to see what a north wind looks like, and they're very, very misleading. You can look out on the water and it looks pretty calm, but as you get further from the shore, the wind increases, and since the waves go away from you, you don't really see them. So it's a very easy wind where you start going, you're like, oh, this isn't too bad. You go a little further, you're like, oh, okay, this is pretty good, and then half an hour later, like, okay, let's go home, and that doesn't happen at all. So north winds, offshore winds in general are pretty tough, and especially here because we have the city, it makes the wind very volatile in power and in direction, so it's really unstable. So it's not, if it's really windy here and it's 20 knots offshore, you'll see 10 windsurfers at most. Like even the veterans choose not to sail in this if we have better options to go to.
I would highly recommend to, before you go out on the water, so before you go out on the water, always make sure that somebody knows that you're going out there. Whether you've come down to the beach by yourself, somebody at home knows where you are and what time to expect you back, and somebody here, and to me, it's, I don't windsurf unless there's a buddy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody I know, because I sail out of Keswick, because I'm up north, and we've got a group there too, and so everybody keeps an eye out for everybody else. So if you've finished windsurfing and you're not in a rush to get home, or you are in a rush to get home, you tell somebody else out on the water who your other buddy was or who you saw last. You know, so you can say, well, Alex, I saw him headed way up there a while back, and he's commonly gets stuck. And he's a good sailor, but he somehow, you know, parts break, whatever. So it's really important that you always have somebody keeping an eye on you. So when I'm out windsurfing, I'm always looking at other people to see where they are and to make sure that they're okay. Because that's what windsurfing is. We're a family, and we want to take care of each other.
Amazing. Thank you, Simon. And Simon is one of the heroes of Outer Harbour, just so you know. He's not all just rescuing windsurfers. He's often out there rescuing kiters, sailors, everyone that plays out there. So incredibly grateful, Simon. Thank you.
If you have a dry suit, what do you recommend wearing under it?
So I would just, like, the way I would think about it is if I was going skiing. So thin, warm layers is what I would recommend, tight stuff. But some people just, I've seen a guy come out of it in a tux, like he's in a business suit. But I wouldn't recommend that for mobility. I would generally wear the same type of undergarment that I would wear skiing, like long tight leggings, long sleeve shirts, stuff like that.
Jennifer, do we have one question?
Yes,
One more
go ahead.
question time.
Yeah.
Simon, could you run a quick scenario of us crossing to the other end? You say watch out for those big boats. Sometimes they don't. So what to do if you, like, the worst case scenario, you want to cross.
So
you
as
have
I
right
start
of
from
way.
here, I start watching.
So what is the distance we need to watch? The speed?
You never know.
What
So
is
I would
the-
just say that you're just, as I'm going, like the second I leave shore, I'm looking at my perimeters, and as I'm going, hopefully by the time someone is in my blind spot, I'm going hopefully fast enough. Otherwise, I just slow down, like I can sheet out.
That's
get more
exactly what I'd
balance,
like to hear.
and
So
turn
we
totally.
don't shout, we don't wave hands at them, we don't show fingers, we don't flip them.
No.
We don't. What do we do? You see, he doesn't pay attention. How do we know he doesn't pay attention? He doesn't change the course. He doesn't.
So
slow
it depends
down.
on what your eyesight is. I would look at their concentration. Like, do they make eye contact with you? Like, if I'm looking at a person driving a car and I'm riding, like I'm doing something where I'm going to cross their path, I try to make eye contact
Right.
and then
So
get a feel
seek
for it.
out the driver.
Yeah,
first.
but I would always dodge them rather than test. Like if I don't get confirmation, I'd stop, turn around, go the other way. Like I give 0% chance where I rely on them to make a maneuver versus me.
Do you whistle?
If I had to, yeah, I probably not. I'd probably turn instead. Yeah.
I mean, I think what Sergey is saying as well is talking about right of way. And I think you have to assume most people on windsurfers, I would hope, understand the right of way rules. And most people in sailboats certainly understand the right of way rules. But if you assume that they understand the right of way rules, that's when you're going to get hurt. So the first rule of right of way is avoid at all costs.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the bottom line. If you're zipping along and there's another boat coming and you're on starboard and they're on port, you can't assume that they know the rules. You better just slow down or stop and turn around.
Yeah, I know with windsurfers, I'll make an early turn very early just to commit to a direction. Because the worst thing is where you get too close and then you both react at the same time.
Yeah.
So windsurfing, that would be because they're really high speed. Whereas sailboats, I don't have that problem. Powerboats, we're not going the same direction very often. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.